Pause, take a moment, find out what it is as a definition that would allow you to translate your excitement energy as anxiety instead, and let it go so that you can add that energy back into the flow of your excitement. Finding those things, finding those moments that don't feel right to you is for the purpose of finding those moments that don't feel right to you, finding out what is causing that as a definition and letting it go. Take the time to do that. Don't just rush ahead onto something else. Take the time to stay there, find out what's causing that, and let it go. Then you will accelerate.
Spread love, man.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something really quite fascinating based on your materials. Specifically, this idea that the excitement we feel, the energy that should really push us forward, can somehow get, well, tangled up and feel more like anxiety.
Exactly. Yeah, we're going to try and unpack that.
Yeah.
This idea that there might be these hidden sort of underlying beliefs, let's call them the definitions, that could be, hijacking that pure feeling of excitement.
Right.
So the goal here really is to help you, our listener, figure out how to spot these hidden definitions.
Yeah.
The aim is to get you back to that feeling of real enthusiasm and just move forward with maybe a bit more clarity and less of that resistance.
Okay, so the audio you provided, it starts with this really critical idea of pausing. Like when you get that spark, that excitement, but it immediately feels clouded maybe, or uncomfortable. The advice isn't to just barrel through it. It's actually to stop, take a breath, and ask yourself, okay, what definition am I holding on to right now that's twisting this good energy into, well, something that feels pretty bad?
Yeah, that pause is just so vital, isn't it? We're often kind of conditioned to just keep pushing, keep going, especially if it's something we think we really want. But stopping like that, it creates a bit of space,
Yeah.
Space to actually identify the root cause of that friction, that hidden definition. And the theory presented is basically once you drag it out into the light, see it for what it is.
You can release it?
You can release it, and then that natural energy, the excitement, it can just flow again, unobstructed.
Okay, but what about, I know I sometimes do this. You try to pause, but then your brain just immediately jumps ahead onto the next thing, the next worry. The speaker in your source material had a pretty direct answer for that. Something like, you do have tools if you've been paying attention.
Yeah. A little pointed, maybe.
So what are these tools? What are we supposed to be grabbing for in that moment?
Well, the main tool here is really conscious awareness. It sounds simple, but it's about actively bringing those hidden beliefs, those definitions, into your conscious mind. It's like deliberately examining what you believe is true in that moment, especially those beliefs that seem to clash with the excitement you're feeling. That act can create a shift.
Like shining a flashlight into a dark corner.
Exactly. Something that was running the show in the shadows, suddenly you're looking right at it.
And the idea then is once you really see that belief, the one causing the anxiety, it might just look illogical, almost nonsensical. And in recognizing that, it just loses its power.
That sounds almost, too easy sometimes. Are they always easy to spot? What if it's really deep down?
That's a really good point. No, they aren't always obvious, especially, if they've been sort of running on autopilot for years. But the act of consciously scrutinizing it, that can reveal the inconsistencies. It's like realizing you've been using a map where Main Street is labeled Oak Avenue. Once you see the mistake, the map doesn't make sense anymore, right?
So when a belief truly strikes your conscious mind as illogical, the emotional charge, that anxiety tied to it, it tends to just dissipate. But, and this is the crucial bit, the real test is your behavior.
Okay, so just having that aha moment in your head might not be the whole story if you still find yourself acting in ways that reflect that old anxiety or limitation.
Then you haven't quite gotten to the root definition yet.
Yeah.
Exactly. The digging has to continue. That intellectual understanding isn't enough on its own.
Okay, so how do we dig deeper then? Does the source give us pointers for that?
It does. It offers some very direct questions to ask yourself. The first one is something like, what would I have to believe is true about myself in this circumstance in order to feel the way I'm feeling, think the thoughts I'm thinking, and behave the way I'm behaving?
That's powerful. It forces you to connect the feeling and behavior back to a core belief about yourself.
It's an invitation, really, to uncover those hidden assumptions we carry.
And there was another question too, right? One that flips it and focuses on fear.
Yes. Instead of tackling the anxiety head on, it asks you to imagine actually succeeding and staying in that positive, excited state. The question goes, if I actually did choose to remain in my highest vibrational state, the state that I prefer, what am I afraid might happen?
Oh, that's interesting. So you look at the potential downside of staying positive. What does focusing on that fear reveal?
It's incredibly insightful, often,
Mm.
because it tends to unearth these negative outcomes we've subconsciously attached to fully embracing our excitement or joy. It brings those hidden yeah buts and limiting beliefs right out into the open.
The yeah buts. I like that.
And the speaker makes a really key point here. Staying in that preferred state, that excitement, it's fundamentally a choice.
Right. The audio really hammers that home. It's not like the good feeling just vanishes on its own.
Right.
We actively, consciously or unconsciously, create a reason to shift out of it. We choose to step away. And noticing that shift, that's the signal to investigate the belief that's making us do it.
Which brings us to a really important distinction the source makes. What is true excitement versus what might be a fear-based belief kind of masquerading as excitement?
How do you tell the difference?
Well, the example given is someone thinking, okay, I'm going to follow my highest excitement, but what if something bad happens if I do?
Ah, the but again.
Exactly. The speaker points out that a genuine, pure definition of excitement simply cannot, by its nature, include a negative consequence. It wouldn't make sense. The very fact that the what if something bad happens thought is there. That tells you there's an underlying belief clashing with the pure energy of excitement.
So it's like the excitement has an asterisk, a condition attached.
Precisely. I'm excited, but
Mhm.
that but is the red flag. It highlights that contradictory belief, that fear that's fueling it. You need to scrutinize the but.
Okay, that makes sense. So really examine those conditions we attach.
Exactly. Now, the discussion in the source material then pivots a bit into an interesting application of all this. How we can use these ideas even when helping other people.
Mm.
Specifically, it talks about things like mediumship or accessing deeper wisdom, suggesting that doing it for someone else can actually help us get around our own mental roadblocks.
That's fascinating. So focusing on someone else helps us get out of our own way. How does that work?
The explanation given is that assisting others acts like a grounding circuit. It allows the information or insight to flow more easily because you're not getting caught up in your own self-analysis.
Ah, so the focus is outward, and your own internal editor, that mental chatter, quiets down.
That's the idea, yeah. When you're trying to answer someone else's question or provide insight for them, you're less likely to get bogged down in your own doubts, your own interpretations. The need to articulate something clearly for another person can help bypass some of that internal noise. And the practical advice is, well, practice. Try answering questions from others.
Which leads perfectly into the next point, doesn't it? That common experience of our own minds getting in the way. Whether it's during practices like that or just generally when we're trying to follow something that excites us. What does the audio suggest for dealing with that mental interference?
Well, step one, as usual in this framework, is to identify the beliefs, the definitions that are framing the experience as interference in the first place. Why do you believe your mind is in the way? It could be, a whole complex web of interconnected beliefs causing that feeling.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it might be something surprisingly straightforward.
Like what?
Like the speaker actually proposes the idea of having a direct dialogue with your mind.
Talking to your own mind. Like having a conversation, that sounds unconventional.
A little, maybe,
Yeah.
but potentially quite effective. The concept is to acknowledge the mind's role. It's a great tool, right?
Yeah.
But also to set some boundaries. Recognize when its analytical input is helpful and when it's actually hindering you from just being in that state of excitement or flow.
So you might, tell your mind, thanks, but I need you to take a break right now.
Something like that, yeah. The speaker suggests reassuring it. I value your input. I'll come back to you later. But right now, I need some space to focus on this feeling, this excitement.
Mm-hmm.
It's about cultivating a different kind of relationship with your own thought processes. And the advice is to be inventive. Find what works for you in those internal chats to create that space.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up a bit. We've covered quite a lot. We started with that crucial idea of pausing when excitement feels off, to identify the hidden definitions causing that twist into anxiety.
And how bringing those definitions into your conscious awareness, really looking at them, can sometimes make them seem illogical and just dissolve.
We also talked about the power of asking yourself those specific questions.
Right, the what would I have to believe question and the what am I afraid might happen if I stay positive question. Both aimed at digging up those hidden obstacles.
And that key distinction between genuine, pure excitement and excitement that's got fear-based conditions attached, remembering true excitement, doesn't inherently include a negative outcome.
Exactly. That but is the giveaway.
We then touched on applying this, like how helping others can sometimes bypass our own mental chatter, acting as a grounding circuit.
And finally, this intriguing idea of actively managing mental interference, maybe even by having direct dialogue with your own mind, setting boundaries.
So for you listening, maybe take a moment now or later to reflect. Think about those times you felt that initial spark of excitement, but it quickly got overshadowed by anxiety or doubt. Could you perhaps use some of these questions we discussed? Start exploring what underlying beliefs, what definitions might be playing a role there. What are those hidden buts for you?
Yeah, what might be holding you back from fully leaning into what excites you? And maybe, as a final thought to mull over, consider what might happen if you started consciously engaging with your own mind in that way, acknowledging its function, but also clearly setting intentions for where you want your focus to be. How could that potentially shift your whole experience of pursuing what lights you up? Something to think about as you continue your own exploration.